Are the Vancouver Canucks heading into a deep rebuild? It certainly sounds like the Boeser trade that's been speculated here since the weekend might only be the beginning of a teardown to see many players leave town. We'll discuss all those possibilities, plus we also have some trade talk around the Minnesota Wild. We have more news on the NHL waiver wire. Could the NHL expand sooner than we may ever have thought? And lots of other injury updates from around the league. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade talk to take a look at today. First up, we do have some news on the NHL waiver wire. Of course, the newly signed forward Alex Galchenyuk, as well as forward Jason Megna, are both on waivers for the Colorado Avalanche. Now, of course, Galchenyuk was still able to play tonight. Doesn't mean they have to be reassigned anywheres. It just helps give the team some flexibility if they are cleared. Obviously, they can be assigned to the minors or not. They don't have to do that immediately either. So it just gives the team a little bit more roster and salary cap flexibility. We'll find out at 2 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow if either player is claimed. Of course, Galchenyuk just getting into action here. Was just recently signed. I would doubt he'd be picked up, but sometimes you just never know. Now, we have several NHL injury updates from around the league. The Avalanche, for example, so we'll stick with them. They already have a lot of injuries that they're dealing with. They're already without captain Gabe Landeskog, who has not yet played this year. They're without Nichushkin for an extended time. Lehkonen missed a lot of time. And then tonight, of course, Nathan MacKinnon goes down with an injury and leaves the game in the first period and is not returning. Tonight they're playing the Philadelphia Flyers. Scott Lawton of the Flyers certainly was responsible for the hit on McKinnon, and I would assume that whenever the Flyers do return, which I believe they're in Colorado soon, that they're certainly going to be looking out for him. He's certainly going to be getting some attention, but another top player for the Avalanche goes down. This team has faced so much adversity this year with injuries. It's absolutely crazy. Hopefully McKinnon's not out for any serious length of time. Time will tell. Ottawa Senators defenseman Artem Zub sounds like he might be out for a couple of weeks again. Of course, as I mentioned a few nights ago, he and fellow Travis Hamonic both took pucks to the face in the game against the New York Rangers. Both of that led to goals right after. It was kind of a really odd sequence of events for both those New York Ranger goals in that game. Hamonic didn't seem to be too badly injured, was able to play. But Zub now, they're saying that he's dealing with a jaw injury. It sounds like he could have a broken jaw and it's out for about 3 weeks. So that's certainly bad news. The last time Zub went down for an extended time, the Sens decor certainly suffered and was during that long losing streak stretch. So we certainly hope that doesn't happen to them again. They've been playing much better lately. They won 4 of their past 5 games. Already obviously missed a few already from Zub, so that's positive sign that they are able to play better without him, but certainly goes to show just how much of an important piece he is back there and is going to be missed on the Sens blue line while he's recovering. Columbus Blue Jackets winger Jake Voracek is certainly facing an uncertain future. Very unlikely at this point to play for the rest of the season. A little premature to say, but it is possible that his career could be over. He could be dealing with a career-threatening injury here with another concussion. I know he met reporters today. He also had some comments from GM Jarmo Kekalainen. Kekalainen at this point said that the team is just more concerned about his health and his quality of life more than anything else about getting back to playing hockey. And Voracek said that he's likely going to be out for an extended time, not expecting back this year, but you just never know. Didn't really want to go down the road of saying that his career was going to be over. It's a little early for that, as I mentioned, but there are certainly some talking about this today that because of the injury past that he's dealt with before and the seriousness of this particular injury and where he's at in his career, that it is something that could come up. Now, of course, Voracek still has 1 more year left on his contract at $8.25 million, so that's certainly not good news. I know there was some talk earlier this year that Columbus might want to look at trading him, but obviously he may end up on long-term injury reserve for an extended period of time, which is certainly not going to make that possible. I guess it's not completely impossible, but not for the same purpose. They're hoping to get a return. Usually when you get these contracts traded on LTIR, it's usually for a whole different type of scenario. That's not what Columbus had in mind by any means, but certainly want to wish him the best and hopefully a good recovery here. And hopefully this isn't the last we see of Voracek in the NHL. Now, we talked before about the Florida Panthers possibly needing to make a move. We talked about some different names that could have been traded in order to activate Anthony Duclair and become cap compliant. It looks as though that's not going to be necessary, at least not yet. They're able to kind of kick this down the road a little bit and buy themselves some more time. Frank Seravalli is reporting earlier today that the Panthers have placed forward Patrick Hornfix on long-term injury reserve. He was on IR, and now he's going to bump to LTIR, so he's going to be out longer than we expected. So this will kind of like delay that decision. Doesn't mean they won't have to make a trade at some point, because obviously whenever Hornfix wants to be able to come back once he's healthy, then that changes things again. So it kind of just delays here the possibility, and we'll have to see what happens. But we won't be getting a deal out of Florida as quickly as some of us had thought we were going to see. Montreal Canadiens winger Brendan Gallagher is going to be out of action for a couple of weeks as well. David Savard also missing action here this evening for the Montreal Canadiens, but Gallagher's injury is a little bit more longer term. Is going to be kept out of action here for some time, so looking at a couple of weeks for him. And the Seattle Kraken have recalled Shea Wright. Of course, he went to the American Hockey League to complete his conditioning stint. Things went extremely well. He got all kinds of playing time, had a good chance to play a big role, special teams, big minutes, and he scored, I believe, it was 4 goals in 5 games. So it was certainly good production, good results, good experience for him. Nice to see him be fairly dominant at that level of play. So he's been recalled for now. I would expect that right now it's still looking like he's going to be loaned to Team Canada to be able to play at the World Junior Championships, and that will be made official here, hopefully in a short term, and he might play 1 or 2 games further with the Kraken before that takes place. Interesting perspective here as well is NHL insider Chris Johnston was talking on his recent podcast about the possibility of NHL expansion. Now, it's certainly at this stage not like there's really any big news or any inside sources indicating that anything is close or that the NHL is, real serious or anything of that nature. But he was just talking on his podcast about the possibility, saying that earlier in the pandemic, that somebody that he talks to as a source that's well-known in the league circles, suggested to him that we might see expansion sooner than expected. Of course, after Vegas and then Seattle, I know a lot of people thought, will the NHL ever expand again? It's possible that they may not. 32 teams is a nice number to operate at. It certainly makes both conferences even. I know that the NHL is happy. It's the first time they've had that in some time. And, it's really difficult to pinpoint if at all or when we would ever see expansion again. But then, of course, like I said, not long after that, the pandemic hits, and that changes things. The owners especially lost a lot of money. And, this is what Johnson's whole premise here was, that they had a long stretch there where they couldn't put fans in their buildings. They couldn't sell tickets to their games, and they did certainly lose a fair bit of cash. And, of course, they're going to be trying to find ways to recoup that. We've seen a few other initiatives from the league, such as, doing some, advertisements on helmets. Some team jerseys have an advertisement on them now, things like that. And expansion would be a huge way to recoup a lot of money. Think about what we saw Vegas paying, what Seattle was paid, and what the next team could pay. If they expand a couple more times and have a couple more new teams come in, that could generate a lot of revenue to really help make up for what they didn't make during the pandemic. So I know that's something that's been, a subject has been broached by a few other people here earlier in the pandemic, especially before things were, fully lifted restriction-wise and all that. But certainly a situation that, like I said, I don't think it's anywhere close, and Johnson wasn't letting on like it was at all. Just the fact, like I said, if the pandemic would have never happened after Seattle, a lot of us were under the impression that, will it ever happen again? It could have been several years before it's even discussed remotely. But now it's at a situation where, maybe in the next couple of years, it is something that we will see. Obviously, it's a situation that there's lots of cities out there that would probably be, that could take on a team. There's been lots of rumors. I know Quebec City would love a team. We know Houston would love a team. Although I'm not sure that getting Quebec City the team through traditional expansion would be the best way for them to go. But the way teams are being increased in evaluations and stuff, I'm not sure that it's going to be a whole lot cheaper for them to get a team that way. Like I know a few years back, I always said that if the Quebec City area ever gets their team back, it would likely be through relocation, not through expansion. But at this point, we don't really have any concrete evidence to suggest the team is in serious danger of moving. For the longest time, the main team that was discussed right now was the Coyotes. But right now, unless something goes horribly wrong that's unexpected for this new arena deal, it sounds like they're not going to be going anywhere and staying put. So obviously that's a team that's off the market, and really there's nobody else that's really in any kind of serious danger where they need new ownership or that they need anything like that. I mean, I know Ottawa kind of gets mentioned, but there's so many rich groups of potential interested buyers there that want to buy the team and keep the team in Ottawa that there's absolutely no danger there either. So I'm not sure for Quebec or Houston or any of those other top cities to get a team. It might have to be through traditional expansion. They might not have a choice. I know the Quebec City government itself had talked before about even helping with some of the funding. So we'll see where this goes. Like I said, there likely won't be something that we follow up on a regular basis. It's likely going to be some time before we hear much about it. It's just Johnson saying that, obviously, it's something to keep your eye on probably over the next year or two as things carry on. So it would have been a time not long ago that we thought this may never happen, but because of the pandemic, certainly changes things here a bit for sure. The Minnesota Wild and Michael Russo, the athletic writer who covers the Wild, talking about the possibility of them looking for a top 6 forward to add to their group. I know some of the players that he references in a recent article that they could take a look at would be looking at the guys like Chicago with Domi or Athanasiou. There are a couple of names, or if the Florida Panthers do get to the point where they have to make a trade, as I mentioned earlier, to activate Anthony Duclair, that it could even be Duclair himself or one of his teammates that could be moved. I know Sam Bennett's name has been mentioned before, but I'd still be a little bit surprised if they moved him, but I have seen his name out there in the rumor mill, so we'll see. But the Minnesota Wild are looking for help with the forward group to add some more additional scoring there if they're able to make that happen. A player like Matt Dumba could be involved in a trade as well, given his expiring contract on the blue line. And the Vancouver Canucks, the big topic here today, are they going to be starting the process of a complete dismantling here? I know the news on Saturday night, Hockey Night in Canada's 32 Thoughts segment from Elliotte Friedman talking about Boeser's agent having permission to seek a trade with other teams, kind of get this really reignited here. And of course, there's a lot more follow-up on it. Of course, Friedman and Merrick had the new podcast come out today where they expanded on a lot of that and some other articles from Vancouver media as well. So essentially, basically, the gist of it is that Brock Boeser has not requested a trade, but he basically has an understanding with Vancouver Canucks management and his agent that it's probably best for a fresh start somewhere else at this point. Boeser himself knows he needs to play better, and certainly a situation where maybe going elsewhere is the way that he accomplishes that. Certainly, they talked about the fact of Bruce Boudreau was going to scratch him on Saturday, even though it was Hockey Fights Cancer Night. Goes to show you, as they mentioned, though, that Bruce Boudreau has got a great reputation as a really good person, a player's coach, somebody who's really on top of things and helping players make sure that they're, in good spots, and certainly not something that Bruce, I think, ever would have set up for Brock to do, is to scratch him on an important night like that. Goes to show you how much pressure he's under, focusing so much on wins, that this kind of a detail certainly, bypassed him by mistake. I don't think he realized it at all, but knowing how important this would have been to Brock and his family for him to obviously be in a lineup like he normally would be on a Hockey Night in Canada night, Hockey Fights Cancer Night. I just don't think he was thinking ahead and realized what it was. He wanted to send a message to the core group of players that just because you guys are veterans making more money, if you're not playing up to snuff, you need to be sitting out as well. And I understand the message, and I don't think anybody would have had an issue with it. It's just how it went down. It sounds like Boeser, talking after the game, had some issue as well with how the message was received, saying that he walked in, saw his name or the lineup up on the board and didn't see his name there, so knew he was getting scratched, and would have obviously rather have talked about it from the coaching staff himself instead of just walking into a room and finding out that way. It's not just so much the fact that it's happening, but how you find out can be a big deal, and that just seems totally out of character for Boudreau. So like I said, I think a lot of that can be attributed to stress and pressure and just not thinking things through, fully in that sense. I think that Bruce probably was apologetic for that, and most likely, will regret making the move the way he did on Brock Boeser. But as Elliotte Friedman went on to talk about, is he feels like the Boeser trade is pretty much inevitable, that before the end of the season he's going to be playing elsewhere. Feels the same is very likely for Bo Horvat. I mentioned before that maybe a Boeser trade might help them keep Horvat. He doesn't think that's the case, though, given the fact that Horvat's contract negotiations in the offseason were still, you know, at that point they were trying to hopefully get things done around like in the high 6s, low 7s. And now with the way Horvat's played and the way the market's changed with some other signings, there's just no way Horvat's going to accept that now. He's going to be well over $8 million, probably $8.5, the way he continues to play right now. So, you know, is it very likely that he gets signed in Vancouver? Friedman does not think that's the case at all. So he thinks it's very, very likely that we're going to see Boeser and Horvat trades ahead of the deadline, maybe one of them even sooner than later. And that it could be the beginning of a complete dismantling. He said that he's not sure that Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin would even think it would make sense to keep Thatcher Demko. You know, obviously the, you know, all-star quality goaltender. Not having a great season right now, but certainly still fairly young, still a guy who's you know, has a lot of good years ahead of him, a good contract based on how he's played before, but certainly would be a player that would have a ton of interest. And the other part of this as well is they figure that the Boeser trade may not give them a great return, given that the goal scoring hasn't been there, at least not consistently from Boeser, so the return might be underwhelming. And to continue to get assets to really push this team in the right direction, moving some other veterans that can help get them better returns like a Demko might be necessary. But like I said, does it make sense to have you know, a longer-term deal with that kind of money for if you're going to send your team deeper into a rebuild? You obviously need to keep a few pieces to build around. Sounds like those intended pieces would be Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson. You know, obviously guys like Myers and Pearson would probably, they'd want to move them as well. You're looking at probably Connor Garland, Demko, you know, obviously Boeser, you know, Horvat. That's a lot of big names, a lot of big pieces there that would be, you know, on the move. I mean, Luke Schen's going to be an interesting one to watch as well. Somebody who's going to have a lot of interest from around the league. The fact that he's won before, you know, cheap contract, veteran guy, can be physical, good leader, good person. Like, there would be definitely interest there, but there is some talk that the Canucks might want to keep him around, even if they are heading for a full, you know, dismantling, retool type of scenario here, that he would be a good guy to have around and help lead a lot of the younger players, and is, you know, good in that sense, and it's not going to come at a huge cost. So we'll see what happens with Luke Schenn, but certainly another name to watch, because I think there'll be enough interest there that they may have to consider making that deal as well. But we'll see if Elliotte Friedman's on to something here, but certainly sounds like the Vancouver Canucks are likely heading down the road of a major teardown, and that's going to likely include head coach Bruce Boudreau. Not a matter of if it happens, but when it happens. I mean, if the team can keep treading water here, maybe they'll keep Bruce around a little bit longer. He may even finish up the season. You never know, but I would be extremely doubtful that he'd be back beyond the current year. But it could be a very different looking team in Vancouver by the end of the NHL trade deadline to finish up the season, and we'll see where they take things. I mean, I know several reporters have mentioned it before, that the fan base and a lot of the other members of the organization were ready to embrace a full rebuild a while ago, numerous times, you know, in the last number of years, but ownership has never wanted to be any part of that. So will they embrace it this time? Will they let this team go into that, you know, direction with this, you know, fairly new leadership team that they've appointed here in the last year with Allvin and Rutherford? We'll see what happens, but could be some interesting names to follow and an interesting team to watch here as they go through a whole new direction with this franchise. Let me know your thoughts on all of today's news down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.